You know what I hate about myself? I know what zombie takeout tastes like.
What's up? Welcome to episode 276 of Zombie Takeout.
Zombie takeout.
The B-Movie and Cult Movie Podcast. I'm Uncle John.
And I'm Scotto.
And before we get to this week's movie, we've got some listeners submitted. This is from Roberto Suarez on Facebook in reference to last week's episode. He said, "Hey guys, in defense of Star Trek IV's ridiculous time travel plot device, it was a callback to the same maneuver which was used in the classic series in the episode Tomorrow is Yesterday. It totally hit the sweet spot with Trekkies at the time. Also, during the trip back in time, the CG effects of the crew's faces morphing into one another was a pioneering achievement for ILM. We take such effects as commonplace nowadays, but at the time it was cutting edge. It was a cutting-edge 30-second sequence that took weeks to render. And if you pay close attention to the audio during the sequence, you'll hear lines that will happen later in the film. For example, Scotty's "There Be Wells" here. We're actually hearing what will happen later in the movie, which makes sense since they are traveling back in time.
It was very, MTV.
Yeah. The effect was, it was 2 years after Tron, so I get that it was pioneering.
Yeah.
So I'll cut it slack for that. All I said about it was that it reminded me of a thing from Black Rainbow. And okay, if the if the slingshot around the sun was a callback, then okay, I'll let that slide. But as you pointed out in your response to Roberto, the real issue was that they came back to the exact second they left.
It's like blindfolding yourself.
Yeah.
And shooting a
bullseye. Exact bullseye.
A bullseye from a couple football fields away.
Yeah. And not just hitting the red spot, but hitting the exact center of the red spot.
Oh yeah, total Robin Hood split the...
Yeah. And Bruce Sardi commented on the trailer for this week's movie, saying, "All I have to say is Shark Avalanche." I have no idea what that means.
Shark Avalanche.
Because it's not this week's movie. We'll be getting to that in a moment, but it's on the list. We'll be getting to it eventually, and we're kind of looking forward to it, but I have no idea what it has to do with this week.
Yeah, that's weird.
Oh, also wanted to give a thank you to Jenny Dreadful from Haunt Valley, aka Jen, who sat in for Scotto when we reviewed Horns and who I mention occasionally. She gave us a shout out on the Haunt Valley Facebook and Twitter accounts, so just again wanted to say thank you for that. And so on to this week's movie, which is from 2013, Snowpiercer, not Shark Avalanche. Of course, that brings us to the impromptu plot summary. Sponsored by Jelly Buggy Bars. New from the makers of Fruity Oody Bars, it's Jelly Buggy Bars, now made with 5% more bugs.
And also brought to you by Small Children, for those hard-to-reach places. Alright, so, you'll never guess where this takes place.
Mm-hmm.
The entire movie, just about, with the exception of maybe 30 seconds of the...
At the end, and I think maybe a little bit at the beginning when they're given the backstory.
Oh yeah, I guess the opening credits. The entire damn thing takes place on a train.
Mm-hmm.
Which is odd because, well, here's the deal. In our effort to solve the problem of global warming, we brought on a new ice age.
Mm-hmm.
Killing just about everyone. Oh well.
And
now,
around the same time, someone conveniently figures out perpetual motion.
Well, it sounded like he was doing it in anticipation of this.
Oh, yeah, true.
There's a lot, like, in the beginning where I was like, why the fuck would they be doing this? Because,
but you can't really figure out perpetual motion in preparation for something, especially when it's generally considered to be impossible.
But, maintaining train tracks and everything.
Well, yeah, you can build the track in the big train, sure, in preparation.
Yeah, it's like train tracks require a lot of fucking maintenance. To just set it and forget it and go for like decades without anybody actually working on them. I don't know.
One of the many problems with the movie.
But so yeah, so he likes trains, so that's what he made.
Yeah.
And I mean, it does fit though, because I mean, the guy's batshit crazy.
Yeah.
So we recreated some sort of society on this train, with of course, the revered in his own little engine up front,
Mhm.
to the upper class closer to them, and then the middle class who work on the making the food and
Mhm.
whatnot, and
Maintain
upkeep of the
everything.
train, and of course security. And then you get to the tail end of the train, which at first you're wondering, well, why would they even bother doing this? And then you realize it's just kind of for fodder,
Mm.
or for the amusement of the people up front, or for just whatever purpose they see fit to exploit them with.
Right.
So, naturally, this leads to some rebellions.
Mhm.
And this is, I'm trying to remember how many rebellions they've had over time.
I think it was the 6th or 7th.
Yeah, this is about the 6th or 7th rebellion, and that is where we come in. Um, they discover that the guards, well, they're wielding guns, but they notice they never actually fire them. And then they notice that one of the leaders said, "Put your useless gun away."
Yeah.
So they take a pretty big leap of faith with that information, but it's true. If they had bullets,
They
they
would use
most
them.
likely would have used them before, long before that. So he guessed correctly, and once they are discovered to not have bullets, we are off to the races with some great fight scenes.
Of
And
course, it takes about a half hour to get to the races.
well, yes, there was a lot to lay down to get to the races, and they so they wind up fighting their way up from one end of the train to the other. They pick up. There's always got to be the inside guy to pick up. He's sort of like in a weird suspended animation drug haze.
Yeah, he was in a morgue drawer. I don't know what was preserving him or why he was out, why he was asleep, unless it was just the drugs.
And he's good with the locks. He knows the engineering of the train, so he helps them along the way. But he has him and his companion who can see a little bit into the future.
His
and
daughter, to be specific.
Is that his daughter? I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
It was his daughter.
Okay, and I didn't know what they were actually.
I don't think this is the second time I've seen it. I don't think I picked that up the first time either. But it was specifically said.
And so yeah, they fight their way up to the train. They see how the other classes live, and they pull back the curtain to meet
the man behind the curtain.
The man behind the curtain, and hilarity ensues.
And at the beginning of the movie, they're going through this little explanation on the screen, in text, and it said, "All life became extinct," and I couldn't help but thinking, so that's the end of the movie?
With the exception of those on the train.
And one of the earliest scenes had to be one of the creepiest. They gather everybody, and the guys with guns come in, and they have all the kids line up, and this one woman starts measuring them.
Yeah.
And then they take two away because their measurements were accurate. I knew why she was measuring them, and it was still creepy.
Well, they make you believe that he's, it's for the worst purposes possible. I mean, he likes young, small boys or whatever, small kids. It's like, wait, what? So naturally, of course, the parents freak out, and the one father gets a little too uppity there, and they teach him a lesson.
In one of the most creative means of punishment I have ever seen in a movie.
It's elaborate. I'll give it that. It is quite elaborate for their purposes. You would think in their circumstances they'd be a lot less wasteful than that.
Yeah. They put this metal cuff around his upper arm open a porthole in the side of the train, stick his arm out for 7 minutes. They actually have someone who calculates the amount of time it would take his arm to freeze. After the 7 minutes passes, they bring his arm back in and smash it with a sledgehammer.
That's gotta sting.
Well, no. I mean, the first couple of minutes out the window probably stings. After that, you don't really feel anything until it thaws again.
Oh, I'm sure the end where it's not completely frozen.
Perhaps.
I'm sure that's gotta sting.
Mm.
Quite confident. I don't want to ever find out.
Mm-hmm. Now, on the less creepy side, actually on the kind of comical side, there's this hand gesture that Tilda Swinton, who plays sort of the enforcer for the what was he called? The leader? The guy running the train? Wilford.
Wilford, yes. Yeah, there you go.
She's kind of his enforcer. And when she says, particular preordained order, she does this kind of comical hand gesture.
It's strange that gesture is repeated several times in the movie, and I think it's kind of used in the end.
Well, Wilford does it one time.
I think our hero uses it though in the end. I think
didn't catch that.
I think it's like what he, Curtis.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's him reaching in to save. That's
right. Yeah.
Trying not to spoil too much.
Because that's the one surprise in the movie.
Yeah.
One of my perspective titles was the movie that spoils itself, because everything is straightforward in this movie. There are no twists and turns except for that one thing.
And that's kind of what makes it weird, though.
Everything is laid bare. There is really no subtext, no deeper meanings. I mean, yeah, you could say it's a message about global warming, but they don't really say much about global warming.
You're actually, I mean, it's not really about global warming.
No, it's really, that was just a pretext to put a bunch of people on a train so you could have a very closed-in revolution.
I mean, there's no subtext, but the text alone leaves you deal with an awful lot. Like, is he really saying that, we're supposed to live with a class system,
That's like what I was always wondering about the ending, and I'm still not sure.
Is there, a real need for balance, in a society to keep us alive?
And the one thing I will spoil, and we're jumping way ahead, but the ending, the very ending, I won't spoil that one little detail, but the end, someone makes it off the train, and actually two people make it off, and everybody else apparently dies. So by escaping this system, everyone else was killed.
Yeah.
Which is a little disturbing.
Well, because what your expectations are built is that Wilford is just some greedy psychopath,
right.
Just, tormenting people for the hell of it. But he lays out some pretty solid reasons.
Well, because it's a closed system, as has been,
right,
as is pointed out like 3 times in the movie. And the first time it was pointed out, it was telegraphing, but I still like the speech. That how, in closed systems, order has to be maintained and balance has to be carefully monitored and all of this. And in the sushi scene, initially.
Right. So, well, and they even talk about when they go back to how many need to be killed, like what percentage of the population needs to be thinned out. So, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, are they talking about population control, or are they talking, I mean, there's so many implications as to what they're getting at in the text itself that I think if you added a subtext, it would be just too far gone even.
And like I said, it takes about a half hour to get to the revolution.
Right. The one guy wants to really jump in right away, but Edgar. Curtis is, of course, no, you gotta hold back.
Incidentally, the character of Edgar, the sidekick, was named after Edgar Wright.
And of course, Gilliam has to be.
Yeah, it was named after Terry Gilliam, of course.
Yeah. He kind of looks like him.
And the leader, Curtis, is played by Chris Evans. I'm glad he did this movie because it proved he could act after Fantastic Four and Captain America. He actually is quite good in the movie. And one more thing that was really creepy, when they get to the locksmith, there's this one guy who can pretty much open any lock on the train, or has that reputation.
Right.
He's the drug addict you mentioned. He's in prison, but the prison is literally a morgue drawer. You pull the drawer out, he's laying there. And they just wake him up. I don't know if he was sedated or if it was the drugs.
It seemed like the drugs, they just had him in like a suspended animation sort of thing.
And the drug in question is called Chronol, and it's basically made by compressing, reducing, I imagine, industrial waste. He's sniffing industrial waste as a drug.
Now, speaking of waste, I think the one problem I had with the film was the revelation, and I use that in quotes, that the protein bars weren't made of necessarily the nicest ingredients.
Well, yeah, that was kind of obvious from the beginning. It was Soylent Green. I was kind of, at one point, when I first saw it, thinking maybe that's what the kids were for.
Well, yeah, you think that too. But it was just bugs, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, of all the things that they could be made out of,
yeah, it was
that's
kind of
probably
because people actually eat bugs.
Shocking. Yes, there are cultures that eat bugs.
They've actually kind of become a big thing lately among like people with way too much money.
Right. So yeah, that was kind of puzzling that like they were making a big deal out of that. That was probably the only fat I could see trimming in this movie, honestly.
Now, I will mention it's based on a French graphic novel called, and I'm guessing this pronunciation, of course, La Transpersonnage by Jacques Loeb and Jean-Marc Rochette. And all of the filming was done with train car sets mounted on gimbals. It wasn't like camera tricks.
Oh, wow. I thought this was a remake of a foreign film, but this was just
based on a graphic novel. And apparently it takes a lot of liberties with the graphic novel. I think he just took the basic premise of the novel and kind of ran with his own story. Now, another thing was kind of comical for me, only because of the reference it reminded me of. At one point when Gilliam is telling Curtis that he should be the new leader, or actually that he is the leader at this point, Curtis says, "How can I lead if I have two good arms?" Really reminded me of coupling. Because Gilliam is missing an arm and a leg because he cut them off to feed the other people in the lower class when they first got on board.
Well, right. And I liked how they waited till the very end about describing the shit show that they came from.
Yeah, although it kind of felt a little obvious that, okay, here is the big reveal of his backstory suddenly now right before he has to do the unthinkable. Or might be doing the unthinkable.
But it fit because of how it was set up, which I guess we can't really go into because that's definitely something. Yeah, who was planted in the back.
Yeah. We don't want to give that away.
We can't give that away.
But Curtis is faced with a very difficult decision, and I think he's basically he's explaining why he pushed forward with the revolution and why he's thinking of doing what he knows he doesn't want to. And he's explaining to this other character who is the locksmith, whose name I don't recall and probably couldn't pronounce. Minsu, that's it.
Yeah.
He's explaining why he was so fervent in the revolution, and it gets to his backstory, and it's basically a description of how bad things were when they first got on board in the lower class.
Well, because if we don't hear that, we just think he's doing it because of what we see in the movie, which is bad and everything. But, I don't know if it justifies the insanity that ensued.
Yeah.
But by him telling you, like, what they went through when they first came in, it kind of puts another level to it,
Yeah. Maybe it's just because I got a sense of that already. I mean, I kind of had a feeling it was a lot worse than they were showing.
No, because, they were so shocked about the protein bars being, with what they were made out of. I was like, that's not that thing. What's the big deal?
Yeah, especially once the reveal happens.
All right. So you move along. You're kind of like, they just seem like to be overreacting about some stuff. Okay, whatever. But then, I mean, yes, they were taking the kids away and they were beating them and unjustly punishing them.
The passengers, not just the kids.
But on the other hand, It was a lot worse.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's something that they wouldn't just get over.
Hmm.
That's the other thing. There isn't like a lot of time that's passed by
No, the whole thing feels
from.
like it takes place in about a day.
Well, I'm talking about from when they're stuck on the train,
Oh,
like
oh,
when
the time on the train. Yeah,
the Ice Age begins to where they are now.
yeah. It starts in 2014. That's when CW7 was dispersed in the atmosphere, and it caused the ice age. And the revolution happens in 2031. So they spent, by that math, it's
17 years.
17 years. But Curtis says 18 in the movie.
Hmm.
I don't know why. Maybe it's to the day, because he said he's hated Walford for 18 years.
Hmm.
Now, one scene really reminded me of classic, like, 60s sci-fi, the classroom scene.
Oh, yeah.
It just had a real, like, Clockwork kind of feel to it.
That's a damn chilling scene, really.
Yeah.
Because, I mean...
Clockwork Zardoz, it had that kind of, like, creepy, like, overly happy feel to it.
One of the challenges, of course, in this film is trying to figure out who they're talking about.
Mhm.
You know, are they talking about just any totalitarian, regime,
Right.
or are they talking about us?
Mhm.
Or are they talking about the entire world in general? You've got the oblivious, rich people up front,
Right.
and the poor people suffering in the back. But that classroom scene almost tells us that it doesn't matter. It's like all of us.
Yeah. It's a Korean production, so I don't know if it was necessarily directed at the U.S., but it certainly fits things now. But I think it is just a statement about human nature.
Yeah.
Oh, I love the one string on the violin. Because you got to figure this violin's been sitting there for 16 years, 17 years. The strings are going to break. I thought that was a nice touch. It also has one of the most clever gunfights I've ever seen.
Well, the fact that there was a gunfight.
Yeah.
Well, first you're expecting that, the whole, okay, they're out, so it's just going to be all fist fighting the whole way. But then it makes sense when they get past to where they're not supposed to have passed. Then it's time to break the guns
real
out.
Yeah.
That part will spoil. He was expecting a revolt.
Yeah.
He just wasn't expecting it to get as far as it did. And why would he have? Because that was really batshit crazy,
Right.
that scene where they're in the tunnel.
And at one point, the train is going around this big bend.
Oh, I love that.
And Curtis and his people are at one part, and the agent, basically. I saw a post on IMDb that compared this to The Matrix Reloaded. Some interesting parallels. But, the guy who's sort of the unkillable pursuer is in another part of the train, and he can see them through the window. So he just shoots through the window. Actually, through two very thick windows.
Yes.
And starts shooting at them. And gets very close to Curtis.
I thought more about him, compare him more to Jaws from the James Bond
movies. Yeah, definitely. He's sort of that archetype. I mean, Agent Smith was kind of the same character.
I'm so glad I never watched Matrix Reloaded.
Now, you mentioned fighting with fists and melee weapons.
Yeah.
I almost forgot about one of my favorite shots. They're making their way through the train, and Min-Soo is about to open this one set of doors. And Yona, his daughter, yells, "Lock the gate." And they turn the camera around, and they show the gate, and her looking back toward the camera as she's yelling it. And it's this great slow motion shot of the doors opening up with this horrified look on her face when you see all of these guys in masks with axes.
Well, I thought that was the one where she says, "Don't open that."
She says, "Don't open that." I think she says specifically the last line she has is "Lock the gate."
Lock the gate.
Before the doors open. And that's the one they catch her expression on. And I just loved her expression as the door was opening with the reveal.
And normally too many slow motion shots annoy me, but I don't think they were. I think they were just with them here,
Okay, I was wondering how you were going to react to that, because I was getting a definite John Woo feel.
Nah.
There were a lot of slow motion fights.
There were a lot of slow motion shots, but I don't think they were ridiculous.
That fight scene was really slow, though. I mean, that kind of felt unreal.
Oh,
that one with the axe, I meant to say.
The tunnel.
The axe scene, the fighting with the axes.
Oh yeah.
Just as the door was opening. That just seemed way too slow.
But it didn't last long.
No, it was short, fortunately.
That's the thing with the John Woo stuff, was he would go on forever with these slow motion scenes. True. And after a while, the human attention span can only hold so long. And after a while, you're not really watching a fight anymore. You're just watching a ballet or something in slow motion.
Now, there's one question I had that, and this risks a spoiler, but I'm going to try to couch it. At one point, Yona runs in to get the match from Curtis toward the end.
Yeah.
And he pushes her away, and suddenly they both know there's something under the floorboards. How did they know this?
She knew.
Oh, right. She was kind of psychic.
Yeah.
Actually, I had read that she wasn't actually psychic. The way it was explained was animalistic hearing.
Okay.
So she could hear extremely well. But I didn't put that together that, it was her who figured out what was under the floorboards. That makes sense. Oh, the part of Mason, Tilda Swinton's character, was originally written for John C. Reilly.
Oh, wow.
It was adapted for...
that.
Yeah. It was adapted for a woman, though some of the lines referring to Mason in the masculine form were intentionally left in. Like Mr. and Sir. Sir is not that unusual because you see a lot of cases of women being referred to as Sir in the military. But at one point she's called Mr. It just seemed odd that they were left in. She also had another role. She was the woman who took the wine bottle from Yona in the club.
Oh, yeah?
Apparently that was also Tilda Swinton. Now, long bit of trivia here. On November 9th, 2012, the Weinstein Company acquired the distribution rights for the movie from CJ Entertainment based on the script and some completed footage, with a plan for wide release in North America as well as throughout the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. It was released in the US in June of 2014 in just 8 theaters in select cities. The delay was caused by Harvey Weinstein, who wanted additional footage added with opening and closing monologues, but the director declined. In response, a free Snowpiercer campaign started demanding the director's cut of the film be released in the US, which was led by cinematic activist Denise Hurd Basher. Eventually, he got it released by Radius TWC, another company. So it left the Weinsteins. It got released by this smaller company, which gave it an art house release, but it was in its true form.
It's quite a cast he had here.
Tilda Swinton, well, she does a lot of art house stuff. John Hurd was the real big name, I think, because Chris Evans was still on the way up.
Yeah, but Ed Harris.
Oh, Ed Harris too, yeah. I think they were just impressed with the script. Okay, so one more point about the ending, because I'm almost done with my notes.
Yeah.
So they get off the train, and it had been revealed that the snow was receding. But then they see a polar bear. Was that supposed to be hopeful?
That was like one of the questions I have, of course. There's two things that can tell you at the same time. And of course, I think that's just how this movie is. It's just when something's answered, there's two more questions in its place.
Yeah.
That tells you that there is life on the planet.
Well, yeah, it does tell you that things are getting better and that, life is being restored.
But it also tells you they better run.
Well, they better run, but also, I didn't even think about that. Okay, 2 people survived the train.
Yes. That we know of. How are they
going to repopulate?
People that have survived.
That's true. They didn't establish that everyone was dead, so yeah, I guess there's hope that enough people survive to repopulate.
Awful a repopulation would this be? The kid's 5.
Well, he'll grow up. I mean, I think there's enough. They have enough time for him to be, old enough to do the job while she can still do it.
It's like, oh, so they just have to survive for like the next, 10 to 15 years, huh?
Maybe 10 years, they want to be, just in time.
And then, she's got to survive a childbirth in the middle of the wilderness.
Well, that's the thing is, even if they did that, you can't repopulate with just 2 people.
Right.
So that's why the shot of the polar bear seeming hopeful seemed weird to me.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's hopeful. I think it's a sign of 2 different things.
Mm-hmm.
That there's hope and they better fucking run or
Oh, that's
hide
it. Yeah, yeah.
because the fucker's gonna get them.
Yeah, it's hungry and there's not a whole lot of meat
Yeah.
around. You got to figure it just came out of hibernation, so.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right, I'm done with my notes.
Yeah, I did not take a whole lot of notes
Same
for this,
here.
but it was.
And I guess we could have a sequel showing that other people survived and, how they're going to repopulate and, rebuild, but I don't think anyone really wants to see that.
I can't see
No.
a sequel. I mean, it would just be kind of a wilderness movie
Right.
more than anything else.
Yeah, and a prequel would be pointless because we know what happened. They've released CW7 and everything froze and everyone got on the train. It's not really necessary. So I think this is a rare case of a definite one and done, which is nice.
It is nice. I mean, I can't see a remake because you can't get a better cast than this, really.
Right. This is really a case of lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
You can't redo it. All right, so on to brains.
On to brains.
Before we started recording, I was at a 3.5, but you talked me up a little bit just because it does make you think a lot, so I'm going 4.
And, yeah, I think I was very surprised because I'd heard this was not that great a movie.
Mhm.
I heard it was very, hard to wrap your head around, but I think that's what I liked about it.
Yeah.
And I really can't see much wrong with it, so I'm going to give it 5. I mean, politically, it's very fucked up.
Yeah. I think that's part of my hesitance with that and it's not even a political thing per se. It's just, what's the message?
Well, yeah, but yeah, there is a political element to it, of course, because it's
well, it's class war and all that. It's kind of saying stay in your place, which is I have some issues with. But
well, at first you believe that the whole the stay in your place is just what the bad guys are saying,
exactly.
And then as you go along, you're like, wow, maybe they should have just stayed in their place. But then you also think, fuck staying in your place, and so what if they fucking crash the train? You wind up feeling when the train is crashed,
right?
You kind of have mixed emotions, that's which is a great thing for a film to do.
Yeah.
On one hand, you're like, holy shit, all these people, their lives are going to be upturned, and on the other hand, you're like, awesome, their lives are going to be upturned.
And if they had just established that a fair number of people had survived, I think I'd be cool with that message. That it was just, my assumption was that it killed everybody but those two.
But
which is
we
why
have
I
no
had to
idea.
It. Yeah,
I think it may have killed the our most protagonists.
It established that they were fried.
Yeah,
that was a bit of a physics issue. Minsu and Curtis wrapped themselves around the two survivors and somehow managed to keep them safe from a giant fireball that pretty much consumes the entire room. So that seemed a little questionable. Anyway, what have you learned?
That my daily commute isn't so bad after all.
And I learned to keep my arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times. All right, so until next time, when we'll be reviewing Dark City, this kind of feels like a two-parter, maybe a trilogy, even though it's not exactly.
Oh, yeah.
They kind of have similar feels.
We're in Dystopiaville.
Yeah. And even the following episode, Fifth Element, kind of has a similar kind of vibe.
So we're not going to do like the Divergent and the...
Oh, God.
And the Hunger Games and the...
I kind of like the first Hunger Games. I saw the first Divergent. Yeah. And also on the Hunger Games sequels. Anyway. Until then, go to zombietakeout.com, check out the album art, the episode description, of course, the episode itself, which you're already listening to. Links to find us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and YouTube. Links to subscribe via RSS and iTunes. Please leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. Also, if you enjoy the show, spread the word. Give us a little word of mouth. Of course, we appreciate all the listeners we have, but more would be better. You also find the movie list, every movie we've reviewed so far, and every movie we're going to review, now up through episode 300.
Yeah, we have a ridiculous amount of movies planned for some reason.
Should be early next year by my calculations.
Yeah, we kind of went nuts last week planning future episodes.
We won't be revealing episode 300 until it gets closer. It has been decided.
Right.
It's probably not going to surprise anybody.
It does make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
I don't know why we were making a big deal out of picking an episode with this still out there on the table.
Right. You'll also find the request form. If you've got a movie you'd like to hear us review, please leave it on the request form. And, of course, the recommendations list. I almost didn't put this on the rec list, but like I said, you talked me up. It's just too thought-provoking not to recommend. You can also email us at zombietakeit@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 414-368-ZTO1 or for the alphanumerically challenged.
You can eat a bug bar.
414-368-9861. Of course, always remember that you will always be calling from the middle of Milwaukee. And until next time, always remember, never forget, wherever you go in life,
there you are.
18 years I've waited for this moment.
So, weren't we supposed to do something else this week?
Oh, I don't know. What were we supposed to do this week?
I don't know. We usually end the episodes that come out around this time of year in a certain way, and I just can't remember what it was.
Well, let's see. What is it this week?
Well, it's as we're recording this, it's March 31st, just after midnight. I think I'm going to be putting the show up a day early this week.
Oh, well, that's cool.
But there's just something else we should have said that I can't think of.
Yeah. What the hell?
Oh, well, I'm sure somebody else. I'm sure somebody in the comments will remind us.
Definitely, if we've missed something.
All right. Well, talk to you next week.